Last but definitely not least is the idea of connecting information within your graph. This is one of the things that you'll increasingly need to think about as you bring more and more information into your graph. I do want to mention that I saved this idea for last, and the reason is I do believe that this is one of the areas where many early Roam users, and I include myself in this in my early days of Roam, get very tripped up. And it's a very exciting idea of being able to create these connections between your ideas. But I do want to sort of caution you that what I'm about to show you is, in my opinion, not super critical to you getting early traction with Roam. So I would take these ideas through that filter and start to apply tags and things that I'm about to show you lightly, but don't get too hung up on optimizing these things early in your Roam journey. Let them sort of organically build over time as you get increasingly comfortable with the tool. But let me illustrate this. And this is, I think, by far the easiest way to illustrate what I'm about to show you is simply just to jump in and show you some examples of creating these connections. So I want to harken back to a comment I made earlier in the course about one of the great, really powerful things about Roam is the idea of creating these connections at the block level. So to that end, I have processed a handful more of big ideas here, and I've given these all a title. And I want to show you with a couple of simple examples here. So I want to come down to this early forms of modern banking, and I'll expand this one out. And you can see the note that I've put in here is banks as we know them today have their roots in Renaissance Italy and were started by families like the Medicis. So there are two concepts in here, the idea of Renaissance Italy and the idea of the Medicis, that are distinct topics that maybe a year down the road, I'm reading another book or article, and there's information about Renaissance Italy, and I want to be able to manufacture the conditions under which those ideas will connect in the future. So what I mean by that is I would simply come here and highlight the words Renaissance Italy and put double brackets around those to create a page reference. So now if I click on Renaissance Italy, you'll see that this block is now contained down here in the linked reference section. And again, in the future, if I tag things with that page as well, they'll show here and I can spot those connections in the future. So that's the idea of inline creation. I would do the same thing here for the Medicis, famous family there. So who knows, that may be a topic that I reference later, and we'll call that one good. One other way that I typically like to do this, and I do the method that I'm about to show you now more often, I don't use as much inline linking just purely stylistically. I prefer to use what I've heard called floating tags. And so the idea of a floating tag would be to apply the tag here at the title level. And you can see like this one would be a good example. So on America's founding, the government was tasked with minting coins. So this kind of applies to money in particular, but this idea could also apply to America's founding. So I might apply a floating tag here called America's founding. And again, the idea here is now that this idea will live not only on this page, but it will also live as a linked reference here to America's founding. And as I build my graph and come across more ideas related to America's founding, they're all going to aggregate here and allow me to spot those connections. So those are just two very simple examples. Again, we used an inline linking method here and a floating tag method. And the idea here is as you're going through these notes, feel free to go ahead and add these links liberally as you spot ideas and concepts that you might want to reference outside of the context of this page. But again, I'll close with a kind of a word of caution. If you're early with Roam, if you're just getting started with the tool, don't get too hung up on this for now. Go ahead and apply those tags and inline links as you see fit, but don't worry too much about optimizing for that because it can kind of get confusing and become a bit of a challenge for new users in the world of Roam.